As I sat at my parents' Thanksgiving table, surrounded by the familiar sights of my childhood home, I felt a rare calm. These visits, now that I was 60, provided a peaceful escape from the tense atmosphere at my own house. My daughter Emma chatted happily with her grandmother, their voices filling the room with joy. It was a stark difference from the quiet, strained conversations I often had with Richard, my husband. Suddenly, my phone buzzed loudly, interrupting the warmth of the moment. Richard's name appeared on the screen, instantly making me uneasy. Taking a deep breath, I excused myself from the table. "Sorry, it's Richard. I'll just take this in the kitchen." But as I stood up, I accidentally activated the speakerphone. "Hey Elaine, enjoying yourself there?" "Well, don't bother coming back." Richard's voice sounded oddly cheerful, echoing through the room. I froze, holding the phone as his words hung in the air. "What do you mean, Richard?" "Oh, I've decided it's time for a change. I've moved Emma's stuff into the house. There's no room for you anymore." The room fell into silence. Emma dropped her fork with a loud clatter, her eyes wide in disbelief. "Richard, what are you talking about?" My voice trembled as I spoke, my heart racing. "It's simple. Emma doesn't want to come home because of you. Without you around, she can live the life she deserves, like when she was younger. So you need to leave." Emma stood up suddenly, her face flushing with anger. "Dad, what is going on?" "Stay out of this, Emma." Richard's voice cut her off, icy and firm. "This is between me and your mother." My cheeks burned with a mix of shame and anger. "You want me to leave our home just like that?" "Yeah, find some shelter or whatever. It's not my problem." The call ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence. My mother reached out, her hand trembling. "Elaine, honey." Before she could finish, Emma burst into bitter laughter. "He's lost it, Grandma. Completely lost it." Inside, I was a whirlwind of emotions, shame, anger, and a strange feeling of freedom. He better be ready. I thought to myself, this isn't the end, it's just the beginning. That night, lying in my childhood bed with moonlight casting shadows, memories flooded back. Richard and I hadn't always been distant and cold. There was a time when his eyes held warmth and his touch felt safe. I met Richard when I was in my late 20s. He was charming, confident, and seemed to have all the answers. His charisma drew me in, and within a year of meeting, we were married. A whirlwind romance that felt like a fairy tale. But the fairy tale began to crack soon after Emma was born. Richard adored our daughter, but as his love for her grew, his feelings towards me seemed to diminish. It was as if there was only room in his heart for one person. "Elaine, can't you see? You're suffocating her." "Give her space," he would scold. Whenever I tried to be part of Emma's life, his words hurt, though I thought he was just being an overly protective father. As Emma grew older, Richard's resentment towards me deepened. The man who once cherished me now barely acknowledged my existence, except to criticize. "Why can't you be more like Emma? She's only 10 and already so independent," he'd sneer. I remember the night Emma, at 15, won a school award. We were supposed to celebrate together as a family, but Richard turned it into a lecture. "Elaine, why can't you achieve anything like our daughter? You're wasting your life." His words pierced like daggers. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling years of his disdain weighing on me. It wasn't just his words. It was the dismissive looks, the heavy sighs, the way he'd turn away when I entered a room. I had become invisible and insignificant in my own home. That night, lying in the silence, something stirred inside me. Richard's callousness, his disregard for our life together, it ignited a determination in me. I refused to let him erase me from my own story. Turning on my side, I closed my eyes, but sleep eluded me. The shadows seemed to whisper, urging me to rise up, to reclaim myself. And deep down, I knew I was ready to take that step. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound clarity I hadn't felt in years. During breakfast, Mom tried to talk about Richard's call, but I changed the subject. I wasn't ready to confront that issue just yet, and Emma sensed my hesitation and didn't push. As we tidied up, my mind wandered back to the years with Richard. His controlling behavior wasn't limited to our daughter. It permeated every part of our lives, tightening like a vice around my freedom. "Elaine, don't stay late at work. You need to be home to cook," he would insist, dismissing my job at the library that I loved. His rules were unpredictable and meant to keep me off balance. If I wore something he didn't like, he'd scoff. trying to impress someone, focus on being a better wife and mother. Even my friendships weren't safe. You spend too much time with Linda Sheck, a bad influence, he once said, cutting through years of friendship. But it wasn't just the control, it was the humiliation at social events. He'd undermine me with fake compliments, often in front of Emma. Elaine tries her best, but you know she's not the brightest bulb. He'd laugh, his words a painful reminder of his contempt. Emma witnessed it all. At first she tried to defend me, but Richard's influence was overpowering. "Mom, just ignore him," she'd whisper, her eyes filled with frustration. I couldn't forget the day Emma left for college. Richard glowed with pride, yet there was a coldness in his gaze when he looked at me. "See, Elaine, this is what happens when you raise a child right. She's not like you, thank God." Those words cut deeper than anything, implying I had no role in our daughter's upbringing, that my years of love and sacrifice were worthless. As these memories swirled in my mind, a simmering anger rose within me. Enough was enough. I wouldn't let Richard control my life any longer. The phone call had been the final straw. It was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. I looked at Emma, seeing her determination reflected back at me. "Emma, there's something important I need to do when we get home. It's going to change everything, but I need you to trust me." Emma nodded firmly. "I'm with you, Mom." Completely. The drive back was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts, knowing we were heading towards a crucial confrontation with Richard. Once home, I excused myself to my room under the guise of unpacking, but really to make a call that would set everything in motion. I dialed the number of a divorce attorney I had discreetly noted down months ago. My hands trembled as the call connected. "Hello, this is Elaine Richardson. I need to discuss filing for divorce." Mr. Adams, the lawyer, was calm and understanding. "I can help you through this, Mrs. Richardson. It sounds like you're dealing with a challenging situation." As I recounted Richard's behavior over the years, Mr. Adams listened attentively. "We can file for divorce on grounds of emotional abuse. It seems like you have a strong case." Feeling empowered, I responded firmly, "I'm proceeding with this, and I want him to face consequences both legally and financially." Mr. Adams reassured me, "We'll work to ensure you receive what you're entitled to." After the call, a mix of fear and exhilaration washed over me. For the first time in years, I was taking charge of my life. Later that evening, Richard returned home, his demeanor smug and victorious. "Back so soon. Realize you have nowhere else to go." His words stung, but I stood my ground. "I went to my parents' house, Richard. Remember the place you practically forced me into?" He scoffed. "I did us a favor. Emma and I are better off without you." "That's where you're mistaken," I said firmly. "Emma isn't a pawn in your games, and I'm not your captive anymore." Richard's face twisted in anger. "What nonsense are you talking? You think you can survive without me?" Meeting his gaze, my resolve remained steady. "Watch me." Emma entered the room, her expression showing determination. "Dad, you've crossed the line. Mom doesn't deserve this." Richard sneered. "Oh, now you're on her side? I thought you understood, Emma. Your mother is worthless." Emma's eyes flashed with anger. "No, Dad. The only worthless thing here is your cruelty. We're done living under your control." As we stood together against Richard's hostility, I knew we had reached a turning point. The battle lines were drawn, and I was prepared to fight for my freedom. The morning after our confrontation, the atmosphere in the house felt tense. Richard's usual arrogance was heightened, as if he was challenging us to defy him. While making breakfast, my hands trembled slightly, but my determination held strong. At the table, Richard broke the silence with his usual condescension. "So, Elaine, have you finally realized your place? Ready to beg for forgiveness?" I kept my voice steady. "There's no need for me to beg, Richard. It's you who should be reflecting on your actions." He laughed bitterly. "You've always been out of touch, Elaine, but this is a new low." Emma, who had been quiet until then, spoke up firmly. "Dad, this isn't a joke. Mom is serious about filing for divorce." Richard's face twisted through confusion, disbelief, and then erupted into anger. "Divorce? You think you can just walk away from me after everything I've done for this family?" "It's because of what you've done," I interjected, my voice firm. "Years of belittling, controlling, and humiliating me. I won't tolerate it any longer." Richard slammed his fist on the table, his face flushed with rage. "I built this family. Without me, you're nothing." Emma stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. You didn't build this family, Dad. You've torn it apart. And Mom isn't just something. You've treated her like nothing. His eyes darted between us, a wild intensity growing. You're ganging up on me, your own husband, your own father. This isn't about sides, Richard, I said evenly, the turmoil churned inside me. What you've done is unforgivable. Richard's bitter laugh filled the room. You think you can leave and everything will be fine. You have no clue what's coming. I met his gaze firmly. I know exactly what I'm facing, freedom from you. Emma stood beside me, resolute. We're done with your control, Dad. It's over. Richard abruptly stood, his chair crashing behind him. You'll regret this, both of you. You have no idea what I'm capable of. As he stormed out, the tension he left behind was suffocating. But in that tension, there was also a profound sense of liberation. The battle had begun, and I was ready to fight for my freedom, my dignity, and my daughter's future. The days after our confrontation with Richard were a whirlwind of activity. I met with Mr. Adams multiple times, meticulously planning the divorce proceedings. We'll ensure you receive what's rightfully yours, Elaine, both financially and legally, Mr. Adams assured me. Richard's reaction to the divorce papers was explosive. He barged into the house one evening, papers in hand, his face a mask of rage. You're really going through with this? Do you even understand what you're doing, Elaine? I faced him calmly, despite my inner turmoil. Yes, Richard, I do. For the first time in years, I'm making a decision for myself. Richard laughed mockingly. You really believe you can survive without me? You're nothing without my money, my support. I'm not afraid of being on my own, Richard. I'm more afraid of spending another day under the same roof as you, I replied firmly. Emma, hearing the argument, came downstairs. What's going on? Your mother has lost her mind, Richard sneered. She thinks she can just take half of everything I've worked hard for. It's not just what you've earned, Dad. It's what Mom has endured all these years. She deserves every penny and more. Emma shot back. Richard's gaze hardened. Don't be naive, Emma. This will destroy us all. No, Dad, it will liberate us, especially Mom. As the days stretched into weeks, our home became a tense, silent battlefield. Richard relocated to the guest room, his presence casting a heavy shadow over everything. Despite his attempts to sway me, my decision was resolute. The day of our first court hearing arrived. Sitting in the courtroom, waiting for proceedings to commence, I felt an unusual calmness wash over me. I knew deep down that I was making the right choice, not just for myself, but for Emma too. Richard, however, appeared visibly nervous. When his lawyer broached the topic of a settlement, a small smile crept onto my face. Richard, who had always prided himself on control, was now at the mercy of the legal system. As the judge reviewed our case, Richard grew visibly paler. When the judge turned to me and asked if I wished to add anything, I took a steadying breath. Your Honor, for years I endured emotional abuse and manipulation at the hands of my husband. I seek not vengeance, but justice, for myself and for my daughter. The judge nodded solemnly. I understand, Mrs. Richardson. This court will ensure a fair and just resolution. Leaving the courtroom, I caught Richard's defeated expression. It was enough for me to know that while the battle wasn't over, I had won this initial round. I was prepared for whatever lay ahead. In the weeks that followed, my life felt like it was constantly under scrutiny, analyzed by lawyers and the court. But with each passing day, I felt stronger, more in control of my own destiny. Richard's attempts to intimidate me grew more desperate and less effective over time. The final court hearing became a day I both dreaded and eagerly awaited. As Richard and I sat across from each other in the courtroom, I couldn't help but reflect on the man I once loved, now a stranger filled with bitterness. The judge's voice was unwavering as he delivered the verdict. The court rules in favor of Mrs. Richardson. Mr. Richardson, you are obligated to pay alimony and half of your assets. Richard's face twisted in shock and anger. He abruptly stood up, his chair crashing to the ground. This is ridiculous. She doesn't deserve a single penny. Mr. Richardson, control yourself, the judge admonished firmly. The court's decision is final. As we exited the courtroom, Richard's parting words dripped with venom. You'll regret this, Elaine. You think you've won, but you haven't seen the end of me. But I no longer feared him. His once cutting words now sounded hollow and powerless. Over the following months, I secured a small apartment near Emma's place. I began a new job at a local library, a place that always brought me solace. The alimony from Richard provided me with a financial independence I hadn't known in years. Emma and I grew closer, our relationship no longer overshadowed by Richard's presence. She flourished in her career and personal life, a stark contrast to the fearful young woman she once was. As for Richard, the last I heard, he was leading a diminished life, his pride and finances greatly reduced. His attempts to reconnect with Emma and me were met with silence. The man who once wielded so much power over us now exists only as a memory, a faint echo of the past. Often, I sit on my balcony with a cup of tea, gazing out at the tranquil neighborhood. Here, I found a sense of peace and purpose that eluded me for so long. Emma visits frequently, and we share conversations about everything and nothing. Our bond, forged in adversity, has grown unbreakable. Looking ahead, I face the future with hope and a profound sense of freedom. Emerging from the shadows of my past, I've grown stronger and more resilient. I've come to understand that sometimes the most challenging battles lead to the greatest triumphs. As for Richard, he remains nothing more than a distant echo, a reminder of a life I once lived and the strength I discovered in leaving it behind.
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread. hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.